Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's Blab session. Tonight we're talking about CVs, and hopefully we've got a couple of people on the line. CVs or resumes, depending on where you are. Hopefully we've got a couple of people on the line tonight who've got some questions about CV. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you present a CV, what the purpose is first off, how you construct one, and then also how you position it in the marketplace. And just before we get going, while a few people join the conversation, my name's Simon Gray. I'm a former professional recruiter. I'm founding director of an organisation called Career Codex, and what I do through that business is I tend to work with sort of manager level, senior executives to help them navigate the job market successfully. So they're in a current situation, they want to get from A to B. I help them to define B and then find B, and then once they've found it, secure it ahead of their competition. And just the credibility bit, because it's always important to know who you're listening to on this station. I'm the author of 2 books. First book is Super Secrets of the Successful Job Seeker. You can find that on Amazon. It's got about 55 5-star reviews now. And more recently, Super Secrets of Successful Executive Job Search. And again, you can find that on Amazon. I think it's got about 25 5-star reviews now. So been there, done it in the recruitment space, run my own recruitment company, sat between people looking for a job and employers looking to hire for over 10 years. And really just taking that information and putting it out there into the marketplace through my business, Career Codex. So I'm going to start by talking about a few things, and then if somebody wants to dial in, ask me some questions, we'll do that. There is a facility, a chat box that I can see on my right. If you've got a question as we go through, if you write /Q before your question, it'll pop up on the left-hand side of my screen. Which means that I can see it in the chat. So if you'd like to do that, that would be great, and we'll take it from there. I'm just going to start the recording now. See if that works. There we go. That looks like it's about to work. Oh, and I can share that on Twitter. It looks like. So let me just put a quick tweet out there. In fact, I'll put the one I just did a second ago. There we go. Okay, just bear with me a second. There we go. Let me post that out. Okay, that's great. Alrighty. So we may get some more people joining us. So first of all, I wanted to talk about when people enter the job market, and the question that I get asked all the time. Generally, the first question is what do you think of my CV? So somebody will send me their CV, they'll want me to have a look at it, and their belief really is that the CV is the magic solution. It's the magic pill to find and secure the job they want. And I used to see this all the time when I ran my recruitment company, because somebody were registered with my business, they'd send me a version of their CV. If within, say, a couple of weeks they'd not been invited in for an interview with an employer or whatever else, then they would send me an amend to that CV, and that would go on and on and on. And I think the belief was really there that if you make a slight tweak or a slight amend to the CV, that's going to be the thing that triggers your success in the job market, and it really doesn't work like that. And what the Career Codex methodology is all about, it says, well, yes, of course, a CV is an important part of any successful job search strategy, but it's only a very small part. And what Career Codex does is it jumps 3 steps back to say, well, first off, you've got to know what the job market looks like. I call it the job market environment. So how does the job market work? Who are the key players? And what are their motivations? And how do you engage with them properly? What do they feel? What makes them act? What makes them do certain things? Because if you have that knowledge, then you're better able to position yourself in front of them. The second element is psychology. And psychology is the most important thing in the job market. So if you're on the job market or about to come onto the job market, psychology is the most important thing. So it's about what goes on in here. Because what goes on in here will keep you going through the ups and downs, or it will jeopardize you every step of the way. So I spend quite a lot of time working with my clients on what goes on in here to uncover what goes on often in our subconscious, to bring it into the conscious mind so that we can make some changes, change habits, and reinforce positive beliefs about the job market, to then think positive thoughts, which obviously leads to positive and consistent, which is very important, action. Because it's very tempting in the job market to go out there, send your CV, not get a response, and believe that your CV is no good or your skill set's no good. It's complete nonsense. Or you have an interview, so you've got further along the stages, you have an interview, you get rejected, and then suddenly you believe, well, I'm not a good candidate. Again, complete nonsense. Just one little thing in any job search or recruitment process. Third element is planning. So many people come onto the job market, and the first thing they think about doing is writing a CV, but they don't really think about who they're writing their CV for. And I liken this to a trip away. So if you're going to go on a trip away at the weekend, then you've really got to know where you're going and what really to expect when you get there. And of course, we have sat navs now, don't we, in the car? So you set your sat nav. If you set your sat nav, you've got a pretty good chance of getting to your destination. If you don't, then you leave it to chance. But there's many people that just write a CV without really thinking who they're writing it for. And we'll talk about this as we get into the meat of the subject. But you've got to know who you're writing your CV for, and you've got to position it in front of them in the right place. So there's a few more people joining on now. We're talking about CVs and resumes, how to write them, how to position them, and how to get the best response from them. So if you've got some questions, /Q, drop that into the chat box. I'll pick up that question, deal with it as we go, and as we get into the call a little bit later on, once I've delivered some of the content, I'll invite maybe one or two people to join me and to have a chat. So let's talk about the purpose. Let's talk first of all about the purpose of a CV. And anyone online, what's the purpose of a CV? Jump in the chat box. Tell me what the purpose of a CV is, because there is one purpose and one purpose only. Well, I'll tell you, it's to get you an interview. So recruitment decisions, and this is ex-professional recruiter talking, recruitment decisions don't get made based on a piece of paper. Recruitment decisions get made at face-to-face meetings. But in order to get a face-to-face meeting, of course, you need a CV. So the sole purpose of a CV is really to entice enough interest in your skills and experience on paper to get invited in for an interview. And for a CV to be able to do that, the secondary purpose or the related purpose is that it's got to stand out. It's got to make you stand out from your competition. And I remember the last piece of recruitment that I did in my recruitment company a couple of years ago, and it was for a finance director position. And I remember advertising this job online, and probably within the space of 24 hours, I'd got I think it was 248 applications, so 248 CVs to go through. So you can imagine. Do you think I read all the CVs? No, I don't. No time to do it. So you scan read, and there's probably about 15 seconds that anyone will spend initially trawling through a CV list to decide whether it's the yes pile, the no pile, excuse me, the yes pile, the no pile, or the maybe pile. And the maybe pile usually ends up in the no pile. Okay, so you've got to be on the yes pile. And all a recruiter or an employer is looking for is for something to jump out from the page that says, this candidate's got something slightly different about them, they've got something slightly special about them, they're worthy of my time. They're worthy of my time to invite him for interview. And that really is the secondary purpose, if that sounds right, the secondary purpose. Main purpose, of course, is to get you an interview. The secondary purpose is all about a filter. And it's the best way that people have come up with at the moment to filter out applications. I was talking to a professional recruiter who's still in the game the other day, and they were saying that they have to use the CV as a first filter, but for senior positions they will always look a bit deeper than the CV, because not everybody is great at writing CVs. But if you don't put your best foot forward, then you run the risk of not getting invited in for that lucrative interview. So you never want to leave anything to chance in the job market, and you have to be as best as you can be every single step of the way. Now it looks like we've got a question come in. Wow, okay. So Duncan's asking, having read your book, oh that's good, glad you've read it. I've removed my profile. Okay, very good. Since doing this, I've had comments from 2 recruitment agencies advising I add my profile summary because of my level, middle manager rather than executive. Would you still advise on not having a profile? Okay, so I'm going to deal with that question now.
because we're going to move into that now in terms of the presentation on a CV. So there are, if you if you look at a CV, and your CV may have this or not. Many CVs have this profile piece at the top of them, and the profile piece is really a summary of the candidate, written in the candidate's own words. When I say candidate, it's the recruitment term for somebody looking for a job. So I'm using the industry narrative. The problem with a narrative and a profile at the top of a CV is that it generally doesn't tell the reader anything, because it tends to use fairly bland, generic type statements like good people person, self-motivated, hard-working. Okay, well that's great, but it doesn't give me any evidence. It doesn't give me any evidence of the fact that you can do that. And one of the things you have to be careful of is trying to spoon feed people with your CV. And if the first thing that I see as a professional recruiter on your CV is that you're telling me you're hardworking, you're self-motivated, well, you don't need to tell me, because I will make a judgment on that having read your CV. Okay, because your responsibilities and moreover your achievements should tell me that. Generic bland statements, first thing I read, it turns me off as a former recruiter from reading on, because there's no substance there. And it's a bit like it's a bit like me saying to you at the start of this conversation tonight, saying, do you know what? Listen to what I've got to say, because I know what I'm talking about. Now, that's just me saying it. You don't necessarily believe me, but when I tell you that I've written 2 books that are published, and you can go and see these on Amazon, and I spent 10 years in the recruitment industry, well, that's some evidence to back up my claim. The problem with the profile on the top of a CV, there's no evidence there. The evidence comes later on. So why detract from the reader getting to the evidence by putting this bland profile at the top? I don't know. So Duncan says that 2 recruitment agents have advised that you have a profile summary. Well, great. It's an opinion, okay? I'm an ex-professional recruiter, 10 years in the industry. My opinion is, don't do it. Don't do it. Get to the meat of your experience first. Other recruiters will advise different things. It's an opinion. Unfortunately, there is no hard and fast rules in the job market that if I tell you to do X, Y, Z, you'll get a result that looks like X, Y, Z, because it's about people on both sides of the transaction. People who are applying for a job and people who are making a decision on an application. It's a game of probability, not certainty. So it's my opinion, Duncan, and you can act on it or trial it. I'm sure there are some employers out there that really like personal profiles, and there are probably some recruiters that like personal profiles. For me, it never helped me, and I actively discourage my candidates from using them. So any other questions, just drop into the question box. I'm going to invite maybe a couple of people to ask me some live Q&A, just so it's not me talking shortly. But let's talk about a couple of other things. I mentioned responsibilities and achievements. Now, the most important thing on a CV is achievements, or are achievements, because achievements are evidence-based and they tell a story. And for any job that you've had in the past, you need to be telling your story in terms of achievements. And the more senior you are, the more added value you need to demonstrate. And the thing with an achievement, it's a story, because there's a start and a middle and an end to that story. So you joined a business, you inherited a situation, you did something in that role, and because of what you did, or you did as part of a team, we need to be clear on that, there was an end result. So what was the start, what was the middle, and what was the end result of that particular story? Because when you go and see a recruiter or an employer, particularly if they're adopting more of the modern approach to interviewing, which is competency-based interviews, they're going to be asking you open questions to try and get evidence of value that you've added against certain competencies. And there's this thing called CAR. You can Google this, it's on the internet, it's not something I've made up. CAR is context, action, and result. So for any achievement on your CV, you need to talk about the context, the situation you inherited, the action that you took specifically, or where you contributed to the team, and then a quantifiable result within a specified period of time. Because what will happen is, when you go and talk to, when you get your interview, the person interviewing you will be looking to probe certain experience. And what you've put on your CV as an achievement, you're basically using it to get the interview, but you're also using it to guide the interviewer to ask you the right questions about that experience. And it illustrates a very important point. You've got to know what's on your CV. I remember quite a few years ago now, one of my candidates went forward for an interview with a big company locally. They were asked a competency-based question. They couldn't answer it, and they didn't progress to the second round of interviews. And the employer said to me, we were puzzled because this candidate had got this achievement on the CV, which was talking all about this, but they obviously didn't know the CV inside out, so they couldn't talk about it. Okay, let's talk about a couple of other things. Hobbies and interests, important, gives your CV a personality, so include them, but think about your hobbies and interests in terms of achievements. So biggest bugbear for me is seeing read on a CV. Well, tell me what the latest book that you read was, and what you gained from it, and what you're going to read next, or something like that. That's more engaging, it's more relevant, it's more evidence-based. If you like swimming or you like running, well, that's great, but have you competed? Have you done a 10k run for charity? What have you done specifically? What's the training? How often do you do it? The more specific you can be, the more evidence and the more convincing you are in terms of that content on your CV. One other quick comment: gaps. Sometimes people have gaps on the CV. Never try and hide them. If you have gaps on the CV for whatever reason, you need to explain them. You don't hide them. And if you are in between jobs for a period of time, well, do you know what? It's absolutely fine. But make sure that you're doing something to build your skills and experience, or to keep busy, or to keep pushing forward. So you've got some stuff to talk about that fills those gaps. So I'm going to talk about positioning in a minute, but does anyone want to jump on live and ask me any questions on a CV? If you do, you should see an icon that says Open Seat. If you click that and dial in, I'll accept you. I only have one rule: that you're polite, courteous, and don't swear. And then you can ask me anything you want about your CV or resume. So if you'd like to do that, that would be great. Just click the Open Seat button. And while people think about doing that, I'll talk to you a little bit about how you position yourself correctly on your CV. So I talked a little bit about destination earlier. This is one stage before the process of finding a job. So when you construct a CV, you'll probably have a generic version of your CV, and the generic version is the CV that you would put out there on job boards or give to professional recruiters, and it kind of gives an overview as to your experience. As soon as you start to get in a position whereby there is a specific vacancy and you can get hold of a specific job specification, then you need to tailor your CV to that specific job specification, because you may have a number of achievements or certain type of experience that may be more or less relevant to a particular vacancy, and you need to go with your best foot forward to position the most relevant experience in line with a job specification. And there is a really, really good reason for you doing that, and the really good reason is this: the person who reads your CV is not necessarily qualified and doesn't necessarily understand the specific role that you do. And this tends to be the case in very big organizations. Now, often the first filter resides with a resourcing team or an HR team. Now, I'm a qualified accountant, I'm a chartered accountant, and back in the day, a long time ago now, I would apply for finance positions. But if I was applying for finance positions to a big company, but it was somebody in HR who didn't understand finance that was looking at my CV, the only thing they really had to go on was how my CV stacked up against the job specification. And for those of you who know the game Snap, it's a little bit like that. This is the job specification. Has this person got this evidence on their CV? Now, my generic CV might not have things that are relevant for that job specification on it because it's generic CV. Or they may not be in the right order to make it very easy for someone to make a quick decision that this person, or me in this case, should go on the yes list. So wherever possible, when there's a specific vacancy that you're applying for, then get hold of the job specification and make sure you have evidence on your CV, ideally in the form of achievements, that make sure that the person reading your CV knows you've got that experience. Now, I've talked a little bit about how you position your CV. I've mentioned it already. Job boards, professional recruiters, and that's fine. But that's what everybody else is doing. And a big thrust behind the whole Career Codex methodology is to look at what the masses are doing in terms of their job search, and then doing things differently. So once you get into the detail of how the job market works, understand the environment, what you would realise is the fact that, in actual fact, the best time to apply for a job is when the job's not being advertised, maybe not even being thought about. And actually, one of the best ways to apply for a job is knowing your experience, knowing the type of job that you want, having defined it in your planning, and then engaging with businesses where you think your skill set would fit well, and also the type of businesses you want to work for, and you make an approach, whether they're recruiting or not. And some people find this very hard to do, and I know why, because it's not the norm. It's out of the comfort zone. But this is one of the most effective ways to find your next position, because you get ahead of the marketplace. Because as soon as the job's advertised, it's on a job board, it's with a recruiter, well, everybody knows about it. It's in the public domain. And I've seen instances in the past as a professional recruiter where candidates who've been smart and done this have created their own opportunities directly with organisations, because they know they've got relevant experience in a particular industry space for a particular company. They've made an approach that isn't about finding a job. They've been invited in for a meeting to discuss this and some of their experience, and a job has been created as a result. It's just a different way of thinking about things. You have to think about a multi-medium approach as well, because a CV is a piece of paper, and often it's tempting, because it's more comfortable, to send a CV to a recruiter or an employer and then wait. And just wait. Reactive approach. Wait for the phone to ring, wait for an email. In actual fact, that's the wrong advice, because you have to sometimes, well, not sometimes, well, let me backtrack on that. If they respond to you immediately, well, you don't need to. But in actual fact, to stand out from the competition, you might need to chase. And by that I mean you might need to approach via social media channels, maybe LinkedIn as well, or you might put in a phone call just to check that the CV has landed with the right person, and expressing an interest in the business, and just asking for some feedback on the CV. Now, that is a really effective strategy. But in the world of technology now, people are less comfortable on the phone. As a professional recruiter, you have to do it day in, day out. But people sometimes can be less comfortable on a phone. And it is important always to follow up, because sometimes people will miss the CV. They've got 288, as in my first example on the start of this call. And the person who follows up is more likely to get the attention of the recruiter or the employer. Okay. I've been doing some calls or some Blab talks a little bit. Let me just have a look. Is that a question come in? No. Please let me have your questions. If you want to talk to me live, we've got about 6-7 minutes. Very happy to take a live call. Doing a bit of work on LinkedIn, putting out some education on LinkedIn. And if you go to my website, careercodex.com, and click on Services Specialist Webinars, I'm doing a webinar for about an hour and 15 minutes towards the end of this month, 2 dates, all about how you put a LinkedIn profile together, which is an extended version of your CV, and then how you leverage it properly to support your job search application. And those of you on the line who've read my book will know I talk about something called the hidden market. Really powerful tool LinkedIn is to get into the hidden market. And LinkedIn is one stage on from a paper CV, because there's lots of different multimedia things you can do on there to make your profile stand out. So I'm going to be talking about that on the webinar at the end of the month. So please jump on the website, careercodex.com, specialist webinars, and sign up there. So what else can we be talking? Yeah, as I said a little bit earlier, at the moment the CV is the first filter. Now the world is changing, technology is advancing, and if you think about all the technology I'm using tonight is really a paper document that chronicles somebody's last few jobs, career history. Is that really going to be the way we make judgments on who to select for interview moving forwards? Personally, I don't think so. I think things like this, video technology, video CVs, more social media profiles that provide social proof from third parties that know the candidate applying a little bit like the the TripAdvisor model, are going to be coming to market and are going to be more important. So we have to work with a CV at the moment because that's what the market dictates. But moving forwards, I do believe that will change, because one of the challenges with CVs is that the less scrupulous people out there, and I'm not suggesting anyone on the line tonight is in that camp, but you can pretty much put on what you want. It's more difficult with LinkedIn because you ask for recommendations, and people aren't going to recommend you for stuff that you haven't done. And there is also quite a lot of cross-referencing, of course, that you can do on social media. And I was talking to a big executive professional recruitment firm the other day, and they were telling me that when they get a candidate CV, before they invite them in for interview, they'll cross-reference the candidate with things like Facebook, LinkedIn, to make sure the dates stack up. They even told me that they would look at somebody's Twitter feed to see what they were talking about, to see whether it gave them any clues about this person's personality or things that they needed to be aware of. So we are very, very much moving away from that paper-based, even digital paper-based CV world into more of a LinkedIn social media sphere, and I think video is going to become increasingly more important as we move forward. So I've got about 2 minutes left. If anyone has got any questions, I think there's a few people on. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's a few people on the line tonight. If you've got any questions, now's your chance. Anything on CVs or resumes, I will answer it. Hello, James. I think it's James. Yeah, maybe. Sorry, I can't read that. Screen's not too clear. If you've got any questions, you've got about 2 or 3 minutes to ask me. What I would say while you have a think about a question, if you'd like this type of information, this type of free content, if you would like to go to my website, careercodex.com, and if you scroll down on any of the pages to the bottom right, there'll be a subscription form there to sign up to my newsletter. I put out a weekly newsletter. It signposts all of these events, webinars, podcasts, courses, free content, as well as some paid content, of course, because I am in business. But you'd be very welcome to sign up there, and you'll get that into your inbox each and every week. So about 2 minutes. Any final questions on CVs? Duncan, I think you're still on the line. If you've got a final question, hit me with it, and I'll do my best to answer it. I mentioned CVs and resumes. Now, there is generally no difference. Some people may argue there is a slight difference. In my view, having spent 10 years in the industry, there is no difference. It's just terminology. And if you go over to the States, people will refer to it as a resume. If you're in the UK, it's a curriculum vitae, which actually, interestingly, means life's journey. If you Google it or look it up in the dictionary, in actual fact, your CV should never be life's journey, because you don't put everything on there. It's a highlights memorandum. It's a highlight summary of what makes you stand out in the job market. So, okay, there's no questions. So, just to summarise tonight, purpose of a CV is to get you an interview. You've got to think about how you present your CV. You've got to stand out. That's the most important thing, because people don't spend a lot of time looking at your CV when they make that first decision. It's the yes, no, maybe pile. You've got to be in the yes pile, because the maybe pile usually ends up as the no pile. And then in terms of positioning, you can't just wait for your CV to be seen. You need to be proactive in how you use your CV. And then, of course, I talked about the future and the fact that while we have a CV as a first filter currently, as we move more into as we move forward and advances in technology, platforms like Blab, then there's going to be more digital stuff, and I think video is going to be hugely important. So yeah, I'll be back next week for another Blab. Subscribe to the newsletter, careercodex.com, and I'm going to sign off now. I wish you all a very pleasant evening or day or morning, if depending where you are in the world, and I will see you next time.